My name is Douglas E. Welch. You can find out more about me than you probably ever wanted to know over at douglasewelch.com. I give lots of career talks. I was thinking as I was putting the talk together today, I was counting how many years I've been talking and writing about careers, and the number 30 came up, which was a little scary. I did not realize it had been that long. I started writing about careers during my own high-tech career back in the late 80s. And one of the things that I've focused on with careers is not your typical thing of resumes and interview skills and management and all that stuff. What I found that the most intriguing questions about having a career were very, very personal. They were about your career. Because really, the only thing that really matters out there is each of our individual careers for ourselves. Now, I'm going to be talking today to you as people who are finishing up their degrees and perhaps thinking about going on to further degrees or into the workplace themselves. I hope you also can kind of listen as a client that you might have down the road and find something useful in what I say today that you might be able to pass on and use in your own work later. That would make me feel really good. I have given, and I've talked about this topic, these two topics actually tonight, quite a few times. I have been working started out in high tech, became a freelancer, eventually moved into new media and podcasting, all that time writing about careers amongst a bunch of other things, and everything kind of dovetailed for me as I freelanced. My career work started to dovetail with my podcasting work, started to dovetail with my new media work, and so on and so forth. So I've sort of generated this career out of a variety of interests that I had. And that is not the normal way most people develop careers. Normally, you have that typical, we think, that typical stair step. Well, I get this job, and I get the next job, and I get the next job. And what I quickly found out for myself, and for a lot of people like me, that really isn't normal, especially in this day and age. In the 21st century, it's very, very abnormal to actually have a career like that. Even within corporate bodies now, corporate bodies are flattening, they're changing the way they make up. You have someone like Zappos who basically said, we're not gonna have management. And 18% of their staff left because they could not deal with the concept of not having a traditional management structure. That's the world we're going into. It's very important for you and the people you deal with later in your careers, think about what you want out of a career. Too often, we simply do things in our career by rote. We take this job because it's offered, we take the next job because it's offered, and we just get kind of pushed from one job to another, and you wake up 20 years later and go, what the heck was I thinking? How did I end up, there's an old joke about shaving a yak. How did you start here and end up shaving a yak at the end of your day? Because you're not paying attention to it, you're letting life push you around. For me, careers are as important part of your life as any other aspect of your life. You often spend more time at your work. Imagine working in a startup these days. The startup is your life. I pity the poor families who have a startup entrepreneur in their family because they never see them for years at a time. It is so important, and yet I don't think in most cases we take the care of thinking about our careers the way that we would about our family, our children, our spouse, or anything else. We kind of let it get sloughed off to the side and let it kind of do what it does. Now for me, there are two basic challenges of having a career these days, okay? And they're kind of at different ends of the spectrum. I'm going to touch on both of them today. The two challenges that I see in any career are, first of all, figuring out what you want to do. And especially in this day and age, myself being a perfect example, people ask me, what do you want to be when you grow up? I never figured out the answer to that question. I just tried to do what I found most interesting and most useful in the world and have developed a career around that. The other challenge is once you decide what you want to do for a career, which by the way, that will change over time inevitably, but once you figure out basically what you want to do, how do you build that career? How do you go from this good job to that better job to this great job to an entrepreneurship to whatever you want to do? How do you move through those stages in a way that is different from the world that our parents grew up with? My parents, I was born in 1964. I am actually a baby boomer. I am born in the last year of the baby boom. I don't have any association with that generation at all. But that was about the last, our parents' generation was about the last generation where the whole gold watch and a handshake at the end of your 30 years at a company, retirement, was even a possibility. Ever since then, that's become more and more of a joke. That's just not the way life works. But yet many of us, and many of the people you will deal with, still have that in their head. Especially people who, my age, who are transitioning between jobs. I just spoke to an open group out in Simi Valley. I speak up there. It's like, this is my yearly thing. I speak here and I speak there in March of every year. And in those people, still in the back of their mind, they can keep that idea of how a career is supposed to work in a world that no longer understands that idea of a career. And that's very dangerous for someone, for anyone, to have a conceit like that stuck in their head, because it's not going to allow them to make the best decisions about their career and about their lives even. So I try to shake things up a little bit, bust things up a little bit, and also through things that I've discovered in my own career. Everything I'm going to talk about is because I've gone through it and I've learned from it. Try to tease them through the process into a new way of saying, let's not think about the externals of your career, about the boss, the company, the resume, whatever. Let's start talking about what you really want. Because I firmly believe you can do okay work at a job you don't really love. You might even do good work on occasion. For me, though, you're never, ever going to do great work unless you have some deeper interest in what you're doing. At one point in my career out here in Los Angeles, I ended up at a mutual fund company, doing IT at a mutual fund company. What I knew about mutual funds and the banking system and Wall Street could have not even filled the bottom of a thimble. Even worse, my interest in such things was even smaller than my knowledge, okay? But it was a job. It was a job I needed. I went there. Company I was working for was a small company that was closing, and I worked there for a year and a half. But I very quickly realized, if there's not something else there within your company, if that company isn't doing something you're at least moderately interested in, you're going to have a really hard time working there, because it will truly become the 9 to 5. Get up, go to work, come home, eat dinner, watch TV, go to bed, which is something that our parents lived with. It doesn't work that way anymore, though. Most of us want more out of our lives and our careers. And so we have to develop ways of building those types of careers. One of the big problems is you have too many options these days. We get that analysis paralysis that starts to sit in. We got, you go to the store and there's 15 types of ketchup. Which one do I buy? And they've actually done tests. They've done market studies that said if you offer 15 to 20 types of ketchups, people will not buy. If you offer 4 types of ketchup, they will buy, because they just get stuck in that paralysis of trying to figure out what's the best choice. I mean, the term you heard today, fear of missing out. How many people have heard, right? That's the big term today, FOMO, right? People don't do things. They actually don't do things because they can't decide what to do because they're afraid of missing out on something else. So I, again, bring it back to the person. I say, what are you interested in? Now, this also helps you to say no to the wrong opportunities when they come up. Because that's another big thing you've heard today, I'm sure, about the power in saying no. You have to know when to say no to things, because they may not be a good fit for you. They may be a good fit for somebody else. They may be a good fit for your coworker. They may be a good fit for your company, but they may not be a good fit for you. And you need the power and the intelligence and the thinking to say no to those opportunities. The fact is, there are too many people out there today who will gladly tell you what to do with your career. Your spouse will gladly tell you what to do with your career. Your children will gladly tell you. Your coworkers, your boss, everyone. If you don't decide what to do in your career, there are a million people out there, everyone from your boss to the guy you talk to at the bus stop, who will gladly tell you what you should be doing, including me. Which is why I say, take what I say as a grain of salt and try to apply what I say to you. Don't take it as some directive that says you must do this, because that's one of my least favorite things. I hate when people tell me you must do something. It's just a red flag to me. It's like, don't, no, that's danger zone. Don't even want to go there. Nothing should ever be a must. Yes, there are certain things in life that you simply have to face. But there's a lot that isn't, and a lot that you get to decide. What this little drawing is here. This is my, I feel like it's a little trademark. This is my career compass, okay? It's just a thought that came to me one day when I was trying to help a coworker decide what to do. They were really, really, really stuck and quite upset. They were in a situation where they didn't know what to do in their career. They were running a small business and they realized that they either needed to come up with a new small business or do something else entirely. And so I said to them, do this for me. Write down everything you like to do and everything you don't like to do. This is before I came up with the idea of the compass. Just write down everything. And don't think about, I want to work for this company, or I want to do this type of job. No, go down personally. Do you like to work with people? What age of people? Do you like to work with kids? Do you like to work with people your same age? Do you like to work with older people? Where do you want to work? Geographically, you want to work here in LA? You want to work somewhere up in the mountains in Denver, Colorado? You want to work in the plains? You want to live on a South Sea island somewhere and Wi-Fi your work into wherever it needs to be? Think at a much lower level about what you enjoy. Do you enjoy music? Do you enjoy what type of music? Do you start to list all these things? Because it's in those ideas, those wants, needs, and desires, I call them, that for me, the key to your career exists, okay? So after that big, laundry list of stuff I had him write out, came to me that there's a way then we have to classify what he wrote in some way, right? We have to figure out for each item that he wrote down, where is it a good thing or a bad thing? Is it a want or not? And that's where the idea of the compass came up. If you've ever flown an airplane, if you've ever piloted a boat, you have your bearing on your chart that says, I want to go there. But you also know, especially in an airplane, which is three-dimensional, you're never on that bearing. The wind is pushing you around, the waves are pushing you around, you may have to go around obstacles. You're constantly correcting that course. And it's in that correction that the concept of a compass came to me. And I said, oh, well, you have to have that bearing. You have to know where you want to head. Because, truth be told, as we all know, reality has a way of rearing its ugly head, and you can never go directly where you want to go. You can't become the CEO of that Fortune 500 company overnight. You're going to have to plot a course to that position, okay? And that's what it's like. You'll constantly be moving from job to job, from opportunity to opportunity and correcting yours. But if you don't know where you're going, you're never going to get there. I saw a quote today that just stuck me. Alice in Wonderland. She's talking to the caterpillar and says, the caterpillar says, where do you want to go? He says, where should I go? Which road should I take? And the caterpillar says, I don't know. Where do you want to go? And Alice says, I don't know. And the caterpillar says, well, then take either road. Because if you don't know where you're going, you're never going to get there. Okay? That's what happens in a lot of people's careers. So we take the long laundry list, and I would actually like you guys to do this at some point. I think it's important for people to do, especially whether you're struggling or not with it. Sometimes it can illuminate something perhaps you even haven't internalized or allowed to admit to yourself of an interest that you might have. So I hope by stepping through the process with you here today, you'll have the ability to take this home and maybe try it out yourself. So I use the default, the North American default, that good things are always to the north. Okay, that's this. Our course is always going to be to north. We're trying to go due north. Up here in the Northeast, what we start to do is we start to note those things we're doing today, those activities, and again, try to break it down to its smallest parts. Those activities we're doing today that we like. Okay, so. Well, for me, I like speaking. Hey, look at that. And you can actually use the distance from the center as a bit of a gradation. You can say, I really like speaking, or I sort of like it, or you can use it that way. I actually do a garden blog, so I like gardening, so that's an interest of mine. I like technology. Technology for me was a vocation and an avocation. I would come home from working all day on computers and play with computers. That's just my interest in life. So you would go through and you say, what do you like? You know, I like being with children. I like being outdoors. Or do you not mind being indoors? You know, two sides of the coin. Maybe you're more of a person who likes to look at nature through a window rather than be out there fighting off the vicious city squirrels trying for your lunch. Again, you have to decide for yourself what your interests are and where they lie. So again, these are things you're doing today that you like doing. Then you turn it around. Okay? And down here, what are you doing today that you don't like doing? Okay, for me, anything that has any form of bureaucracy or forms or corporate speak drives me mad. I worked in the corporate world for about 15 years and finally realized and was given the lucky happenstance of having a television writing wife to say, I don't need you anymore and I want to be a freelancer, okay? But that is something that just irks me at every step of the way, is bureaucracy, corporate speak. I'm trying to think, what else do I not like? I don't like being indoors every day. I do like some outside time. Although I'm a high-tech person, I often say that there should be a balance in everyone's life between high-tech and high-touch. So I'll work on the computer in the morning, I'll go for a hike in the afternoon. I'll take a computer to the wilderness park out on Canaan Doom Road and sit in the woods and write on a computer. I know it sounds weird, but that's a perfect combination for me of those, that's high-tech and high-touch elements. Okay? What's something that you guys don't like? What would you put down here in this column, this quadrant? Math. Math is a big one. I have a great book to refer you to. There's a guy named Art Benjamin who does math magic, and he has The Art of Mental Math is his, The Secret of Mental Math, I think is his latest book. It helped me get over my math phobia a bit. But definitely big one, public speaking, right? How many people, which these days, I don't know how you survive if you have a fear of public speaking these days, but some people don't like getting up and presenting in front of people. Then don't have a job that requires you to give presentations day in and day out. You will absolutely hate it, right? But if you've never thought about that, maybe you didn't put it down there. Working through the compass requires some hard thinking. This is something I often call the readers of my career column, career opportunities, to do. You know, they hate that word. I get that feedback from them. So, uh-oh, he said hard thinking again. Because that's often the most important things you have to think about, are those things that are difficult, that are hard to think about. You know, what do you want? How do you balance life, career? How do you decide what you want to do? How do you decide, even when everyone else is telling you no, that you want to say yes to something? Okay, hard thinking. Beyond that, most people don't think at all. I talked about earlier about the fact that people often just get pushed from job to job. Well, here's a job. Oh, I need a new job. Oh, that one's available. Okay, I'll take that. That one's available. I'll take that one. And you wander out here in the woods, you know, and you're like, how did I get out? How did I get to where I am today? And that is exactly what will happen if you don't do some hard thinking and some conscious thought about what you want to do. Okay. Up here, I know I'm probably triggering your math phobia with my, who has chemistry phobia? I guess it's more like a ionic bond notation or something like that, right? These are things you're not doing today, that you like doing. What would you like to do? What would you like to try to make part of your career? Do you want to play music? Do you want to work with kids? Do you want to live on that South Sea island and phone in your work via the Wi-Fi? What do you want to do? You know, do you like travel? I like traveling for pleasure, but I hate traveling for work, and that was something I had to figure out early on in my corporate career. It's like they would want to send me. It's like, no, if I can go there and just visit, I'm glad to. Go there to work, you don't see anything but the inside of the hotel and the inside of the office. It's not that much fun. So traveling for work is not a big thing for me, but traveling in general, if I can travel for fun, I'm also an avid photographer. I love taking photos. Travel is a great opportunity for that. Finally, the last quadrant down here. Things you are not doing today that you never want to do. Okay, and I don't think enough of us think about that one. I have a story. My wife, She started out as a teacher. We met in college. She was doing her first rotation of student teaching in the elementary classroom. She came home and said, oh my God, I cannot ever do elementary school teaching. I can't discipline them. I just want to hug them. I feel sorry for, that Tommy's being picked on by his sister. And oh my God. And she ended up being a high school teacher first because she immediately learned that, seriously, the first week of that student teaching, she knew right then, no, not going to work in elementary school. Cannot do it. She's more than glad to tell high school students, hey, listen to me, or you can end up working at a fast food restaurant, okay? She's no compunction about that. Now she teaches at the college level where she is even more circumspect with her students. It's like, you paid to be here. You don't want to be here and learn. Well, that's your lookout. I'm going to give the lecture whether you want it or not. So that's one example from our personal life. You have stuff from your other life. As I said, for me, working in an office, working in a high-rise these days, no. Any sort of corporate thing. Even, I worked for Walt Disney Imagineering for 5 years. Okay, amongst the companies that were considered really good to work for at the time, that was probably one of the best, and probably is considered one of the better companies to work for, Walt Disney. At its very heart, though, it's still a big corporation. And if you don't realize that, you go into the company and go, there's neat stuff. I got to do a lot of neat stuff. But on top of that, there was always this layer of bureaucracy pushing, still got to fill out the W-4 form, still got to fill out the paperwork, every week and all that stuff. So that and the mutual fund job sort of beat any joy out of working in cubicles out of me. So I remember that very carefully and very closely, and that always goes down in that quadrant for me. Any other ideas you guys can think of, something like that? Something you're not doing and you never want to do, but you want to be very clear that you never want to do that. Politics? Conflict for me, I'm a non-conflict person, totally non-conflict. Let's see here, let's draw a cheesy little American flag here. And I couldn't do politics. I would go mad. I'd be the candidate running off to the bathroom to cry. I cannot deal with that at all. So that's another thing that doesn't even enter into my equation. I don't think I've ever put that down there for me, but yeah, I probably should be there. Just so I don't ever get convinced for someone to go, no, you should really become a neighborhood council person. I got asked to do that the other week, and it's like, no, no, especially local politics, no. Does that make sense to people? Okay, if you were to sit down with this and draw this out, and I sort of would like you guys to at some point in your life, I say you should revisit the compass about every 6 months, really, because life changes that frequently these days. You were going happy-go-lucky and single, living in a one-bedroom apartment or a studio apartment, having a good old time, and then you meet someone you really, really like. Okay, that changes everything. Okay, when I met my wife in college, I met her my first night of my fall semester in college. Okay, so I'd been there in the summer for one quarter in the summer, and we met the first night of fall semester. My entire life changed. We've not been apart since. We've been married 30 years in June, and known each other for 32 beyond that at least. You don't know it until the baseball bat smacks you upside the head of things that can change your life. If you have an elderly parent, or your parents are getting elderly, I'm of a certain age where all of our parents are getting old, and there are certain realities that have to be dealt with and controlled. That changes your life. So by revisiting this, you may see that, what used to mean, a real lot to you, that South Sea Island was looking really, really attractive, but you've developed a joy of family. You want to spend more time with your family. You want to spend more time with your nieces and your nephews and your cousins. My wife's grandfather is from Sicily, and about 8 years ago we reconnected with our relatives in Sicily. And we've now been back 3 times. We're going back again in June for our 4th trip. You couldn't have, as a farm boy growing up in a farm town in Ohio of 2,000 people, I never thought I would visit Europe, let alone go to Italy 4 times. No, nowhere in my world was that ever a possibility. So you got to come back and you got to revisit this. So this can help you decide what you want to do. The other great thing I like about it is it can help you evaluate opportunities that come to you. Because in the next section, we're going to talk about this whole opportunity economy, or whatever we want to call it. Oftentimes, if an opportunity shows up to you out of the blue, what is your first response? Well, I know for me, it's fear. You get that fight or flight response. You're like, oh, that's too different. I can't, no, can't get it. And oftentimes, I see people, myself included, slam the door in opportunity's face. You're like, why did I do that? And I had to figure out over time of talking to people, why do we do that? And the fact is, people tend to think that just talking about an opportunity means they're accepting it. And I have to talk them down from the ledge and say, no. It's just an opportunity. Why wouldn't you go and meet with that person? Why wouldn't you go have coffee with that person? Why wouldn't you talk about this opportunity? Yes, it might be totally. I got asked once to go on a tour through Japan with a blues guitarist as his harmonica player. Well, I didn't do that professionally. I did it as a hobby. But it just, events around, it didn't happen, but events arose. I had to really think about that for a while and said, I never thought of that. What a weird thing, and it scared me. And I wanted to say no, but I had to say no. Why can't I talk about it? As a case, it didn't happen, and lots of opportunities aren't going to happen, but you don't want to be the one turning away that one opportunity that's going to change your life forever. Because that's how opportunities happen. Serendipity walks up with the baseball bat, ping, and something you never thought of, or two things combined, which is a whole nother talk that I give about how things bumping up against each other, interests bumping up against each other, can suddenly spur entirely new careers and everything else. When you use the Career Compass, you can say, okay, here's this opportunity. What are the elements of this opportunity? Okay, contained music, it contained travel, it contained, but I had that bad business travel element possibly in there. So for me, I could then come to my compass and say, where does it fit? Where does this opportunity fall on my compass? Are there any aspects of the opportunity that are down here? Bad sign, red flag. Down here, I'm already doing the things that I don't like. No, red flag. I mean, you can say anything below the middle here, the equator here. You don't want to go there, okay? But by having some methodology, and I assume that probably each and every one of you is going to develop your own methodology as you go through life, because we all learn in different ways. But having some sort of little rubric to plug things into can really help your thinking. I liken this to a mind map. How many people have used mind mapping at all? Guess it's fallen out of. It's one of those things you either love or you hate. I come and go with it, but it's sort of like that. It's basically it's just a blank form that you can start to fill in, and it'll start to trigger other thoughts. It can increase your thinking quite a large amount. So when an opportunity comes to you, please come back here, evaluate it against a compass, because it's going to tell you right away. Actually, once you break out what that opportunity entails, it's going to be very clear immediately. Okay, no, it's got too many bads, or it's, God, these are really good. Maybe I should investigate this further. And that helps a lot, because it helps to get around that analysis paralysis I talked about earlier, that having too many options, too many choices. As a high-tech guy, I have one fatal flaw. I don't want to decide against 100 different computers, which is one of the reasons I buy Apple. I go in and I say, I want that one, because that's the one that works for me. And we all get presented with opportunities and face challenges like that every day, where there's too many options. So it helps to have some way of figuring out where that opportunity fits on the scale, and just simply what we want. Because in all the talking I've had with people over the years, and all the clients I've talked to, and all the column feedback I've gotten, the podcast feedback I've gotten, 99% comes down to the fact they just aren't allowing themselves to think about it. They choose the default, cliche, corporate, what their parents thought, whatever answer of the period. And if they try to go against that, it causes them angst. It's like, how do I not do this? How do I not do what everyone says I should be doing? Well, because it's not right for you. And that's the important thing you have to learn. If it's not right for you, it's how cliche can it be? It's a square peg in the round hole. You're just not going to fit. I tried to fit in the corporate world. I really did. No, just not my thing. Not my thing. You have to figure that out. Now, of course, once you hopefully at least figure out what you want to do right now, okay, which is why you have to revisit this. The other thing you need to consider, the other challenge that you and the people you are going to deal with face is, let me erase this real quick. Once you figure out what you want to do, how do you do it? What are the steps? What are the ways that you take the career compass and use it to develop a career like my own, if you want, out of a mishmash? Anyone who looks at it from the outside sees nothing but a mishmash. The fact is, it took me years to figure out what everything relates to in my career. The fact is, everything I do relates to education. I don't teach in the classroom, beyond presentations like this, but everything I do has something to do with education. I love teaching people about things. Used to be technology almost fully. I used to worked in a corporate IT departments, and I started working in people's homes, small offices, stuff like that, started talking about it, started writing about it. But everything over the years finally revealed to me that I do education. And you're going to need to figure out that same thing. So once you've figured that out, we're used to, in this day and age, a job environment, which I say is ending, not rapidly enough for my liking, but it is ending, of where we take our resume, we go hat in hand, and we beg for a job. I mean, that's really, ever since I've been in the workforce, ever since our parents have been in the workforce, that's been the model. You say, please give me a job. It's even how you talk about it. When someone says they hired you, I gave them a job. Well, I like to think you didn't give them a job. You hired the person who has the skills you need. Okay, just the terminology used, to me, is backwards and off. It will probably never happen in my lifetime, but my goal for the work world, and I hope that some of you will be able to implement this in your own life, is instead of going out begging for the next job or the next or this or the other, is you attract opportunity to you. Okay? This goes back to what I said earlier about serendipity. We never know where great career opportunities are going to come from. They could just as easily come to us as from the person sitting next to us at the Starbucks or whatever, as they could from some formal job ad on monster.com and sending in your resume and doing all of that. And in fact, I believe that in this day, the opportunities that come from the Starbucks person are going to be more plentiful, and they're also going to be more profitable and more to your liking. Okay? They're going to be scary. They're going to be different. They're going to force you to think in new and different ways, and they're going to force you to think about flipping that job search over and start to do things that attract opportunity to you. Okay. Now, this is going to sound really weird. I always get some odd looks when I talk about it in this way, but there are a couple things that you need to be doing today, if you aren't doing them already, to start the opportunities coming to you. Okay? The phrase you're going to hear me say again and again and again in this next section is, you need to be showing people constantly what you do and how well you do it. Okay? If you are not doing that on a daily basis, you are limiting yourself, you are limiting your opportunities, and you're putting yourself in the position of having to beg for a job. Okay. What you do and how well you do it. Now, as you can imagine, back in 1986, when I entered the work market, the tools to do something like that, to tell people what you do and how well you do it, didn't really exist. But since the invention of the internet, we now have a series of tools that make it easy, cheap, if not free in most cases, and provide you a way of reaching out to a world of opportunity that was never possible before. Okay? The best way of telling people what you do and how well you do it is to tell somebody about it. Okay? And one of the first things I tell most people to do is start a blog. A blog can be anything. There are free services all over the place to set up a blog. WordPress, Blogger, Tumblr, Twitter can be considered a microblog, if you will. The reason I start with a blog is when I talk to people, I say, well, what do you want to do? What are your skills? What are you interested in? What neat things have you done? They'll start off saying, oh, I don't have anything interesting to say. It's like, everybody has something interesting to say. Everybody has something neat that they do, you know, but they don't have a place to tell people about it. And what I find is the minute you have a place to put stuff like that, you start to think about stuff that you want to put there. And this can be in any job. This can be a plumber, a chemist, a doctor, a lawyer, a psychologist, doesn't matter. You need a place for these interesting ideas that you stumble across in your work and your life that you can share with other people that demonstrate very clearly what you do and how well you do it. Okay? Again, I'm a tech guy, I have 5 blogs because they're all broken out by interest because my interests are so varied. But the fact is you just need some place because in our search engine-based world, our Googleized world, you don't know who's going to see that. Just like we don't know who we're going to sit next to at the coffee shop, we don't know who's going to do a search on some obscure enzyme reaction with a protein or something and happen across your blog about your research into that area. You don't know. You can't know. It's your job to put that stuff out there. It's a famous study from a creativity book many years ago, many decades ago, where they took 2 art classes and they said, art class A, your job is to produce the perfect pot. You have all semester, produce the perfect pot, okay? They went to the second class and said, class, your job is to produce as many pots as you can possibly do in the semester, okay? Quality doesn't matter, just produce as many pots as you possibly can. Then they had a little show at the end of the semester. And they brought the pots together from the quantity class and the quality class. Guess which class was judged to have the highest quality of pot? These guys. Quantity is important if you're learning from each one you do. The fact is, while this class was trying to perfect a pot, this class was throwing out tons and tons of pot and hopefully learning with every single pot they made. What did work, what didn't work. So that by the end of the semester, they were able to produce a high quality pot because they simply learned by doing. And I know learning by doing these days, it's coming and going. We have this whole maker ethic that's coming out now about, getting your kids hands-on STEM and STEAM programs and stuff like that. I personally think that the best way to learn is having some component of doing. Yes, there's certain things you just need to learn. But there's also, if you can learn something and apply that learning immediately in some physical or useful or productive method, for me, I know that would lock in facts that I retain to this day from my high school botany class that I should by no rights need or want to remember, but they are burnt into a groove in my brain because we talked about it in the classroom and we went down to the greenhouse and we did it. And that has always been so effective for me. This is one form of your doing. If you have to explain a concept to somebody else, it makes it easier for you to remember and understand it. Because you start asking yourself questions. You're trying to explain it to someone who knows nothing about it or is struggling with it. And you have to go, well, why is it that way? Why? Oh, well, hold on. And then you have to figure it out. And then you can explain it to them. But it very quickly exposes the limits of your knowledge and things. And so you can't help but learn things more deeply, apply them in a better way, and help those around you. Okay? So I highly encourage you, take your thinking, take your thoughts, take your neat things that you do, whether company-based or personal-based, it does not matter, and start talking about them online, please, because the big thing that's going to do, and everything else I'm going to talk about is going to do, it's going to start attracting opportunity to you. Someone is going to stumble across it. Someone's going to send you a question about it. Someone's going to email you about it. Someone else is going to think, hey, that's pretty cool. Okay, I built this robot that does that. I guarantee you, you do something like that, people are come out of the work. Oh, that is so cool. Have you thought about doing this, this, and this to it? Or, it has always amazed me the type of response you can get from people. My own personal example is one that came out of my gardening interest in my life and would have never happened had I not been doing this, okay? Been writing, we bought our house 20 years ago, came with a 10-year garden, beautiful garden front and back, 10 years in the making by an elderly woman. I actually had her walk me through the garden and identify plants I didn't know and tell me about care and feeding and everything before she moved out. And I'd grown up in a farm town, and so I suddenly had a reason to garden again. And so in doing that, I started writing about it. I'd been blogging about other stuff, general events and life stuff and stuff like that. But I said, well, here's okay, this is a particular topic I can talk about. Did that for a while. Troy built garden equipment from my home state of Ohio, oddly enough, stumbled across my blog at one point and said, oh, hey, if you want to review anything, just look in the catalog. We'll send you anything you want. You get to keep it. Just give us a review on your blog. Okay, great way to get some free garden equipment, a couple $100 of free gardening. That's great. So I did that for a couple years with them. About 3 or 4 years into that, they decided they want to have their own social media presence. They're finally ready to make that leap into social media, as many companies were doing, 3 to 4 years ago. And they wanted to hire 6 bloggers, the Saturday 6, to blog for their site, do events for them, travel around and promote, use Troy Built and help them promote the company, which was a paid job. Which they sent me the notice, and I said, yes! Where do I sign up? Because at the time, what they were going to pay me was worth 50 hours of my consulting time. Okay? So 50 hours of work I wasn't going to have to do. And it was in an interest that I really liked. The point being, though, had I not taken the effort to be putting my gardening stuff online, they would have never seen it. And more importantly, I wouldn't have been first in their mind when they decided to move forward with their own social media program. That's what opportunity can do for you. You want to be in someone's mind. Companies sit around saying, oh, geez, our accountant's leaving, our CFO's leaving. Who do we know that, who do we know? We know any CFOs, any CPAs? Oh, well, how about Bob? That's where that job's coming from. Long before it ever gets listed, long before it ever gets bannered around, even the internal circles, the people inside the company go, who do we know? And that doesn't necessarily need to be a hard contact, like I know Bob, we have lunch every week or play golf every week or something like that. It can be a casual contact. I've been reading this guy's blog about this, and he's here locally. We should talk to him about this. You never know, okay? And yes, my little gardening thing is a little bit of a smaller example, but I believe it is a true example of what can happen when you simply start doing these things. The next step, once you got your blog up and running, is sharing beyond your blog what you do. Now, how many people use Facebook? How many people use Facebook effectively? Yeah, I struggle with this every day. Facebook right now, and these items from here on in will change. They could change by the time I get home tonight, okay? But these are the things that are kind of attracting attention right now. Facebook has not been that useful to me over the years, but recently, through a connection of friends and the way they're doing stuff on the site, it has actually become one of my foremost interaction points beyond my blog itself. It was Twitter for the longest time, but Twitter's not quite sure what it is anymore. But it's still useful. I still use Twitter. If you follow me, you'll see what I post there. Again, one of the things I learned when I started podcasting was I figured when I started podcasting, did an audio podcast of my weekly career column that I'd been writing for several years. And I figured, oh, this is just another way for those readers to consume the column, right? No. This audience, let's say, was probably, I'm going to say, a fourth crossed over with that audience. And I would say that's a good number for all these. Yes, there'll be people who follow you in both places, but the majority of the people who follow you on Twitter will not be the people that follow you on Facebook. There won't be the people who follow you on LinkedIn. There won't be the people who follow you on Tumblr. It's a separate audience. So each one of these that you use to expose your work and what you do and how well you do it actually gets you another audience. And that was something I had to learn by doing. I didn't expect that at all until I started looking at my statistics and went, these people don't, they either, when I get feedback from people, it's like, oh, they're obviously a reader, they're obviously a listener. And very, very little crossover in between. And that really surprised me. And that drove me then to say, okay, what other sites can I be using? What other ways can I be using to get the word out that will garner me another audience? Another really big one right now. I won't say it's very good for income anymore, but as ways of telling people what you do and how well you do it, YouTube. When I talk about new media, I talk about the levels of intimacy of various media. A written book can be very intimate. We can cry at the end of Harry Potter, okay? It can really hit us with the feelings. But audio is another level of intimacy. I often describe it as an audio podcast is literally whispering in people's ears. If you think about how people walk around with their earbuds in, you're literally whispering in people's ears. It's a much higher level of intimacy. And of course, when you get to video, you're now at the level of intimacy falling just short of being there in person. Okay? Because they get much more physical cues from you in a video. They can see your face, they can see your gestures. It's the reason that you see I set up my camera and my mic tonight, record everything I do because it all goes on YouTube. Okay? That's where I can send people to. And I have people find talks years later who write me very, very heartfelt notes saying, oh my gosh, I can't believe I just stumbled across this now. This is great, exactly what I needed here. And it's like, okay, that reinforces the reason I do these things. And it also reinforces the reason I tell people about these things. Because I have seen it work in people's favor. Because again, you want to be first in people's minds when they have a need, regardless of what that need may be. It can be any specialty, as I said. You can be a plumber, a cook, a chef, whatever. It does not matter. If someone wants to learn how to cook coq au vin, okay, you go to Google or YouTube and say coq au vin, coq au vin recipe, and you'll find just as many videos of people making coq au vin as you do find recipes listing it out in text. Okay, it can be very, very useful to you. Another important concept of all these things is to be proud of your work. And I sort of took this to heart in the corporate world, where reports would get made, reports would get sent up the chain, questions would get asked, your boss would come back to you with the questions, and your answers would get filtered back up through the chain of command. I made a point, after about my second year at Disney, that if I did anything, if I did a report, if I did a spreadsheet, if I helped with a project, you know what I did? I signed the darn thing. There'd be somewhere in that program, that spreadsheet, that document that said, by the way, if you have any questions, talk to Doug. He's the one who did it. Because otherwise you are an anonymous cog in a corporation. You don't exist. Some cobbler's elves down in the basement put together that report. Okay? You're not doing it to be boastful. You're not doing it to show off. You're simply, like any artist, signing your work. And I learned that from an art teacher I had at Walt Disney Imagineering. We were lucky enough, even though I was in IT, we got to go to art coaching nights if we wanted. And I took great advantage of that. I'm an amateur watercolor painter. Mainly because I got to work with my art coach, Ron. And one of the first things Ron said, we'd be working away and doing little stuff in the coaching session. And he'd say, yeah, that's finished. Sign it. Because when you sign it, you take ownership, you become proud of that, and you will do better work after that point. Because you have taken control and pride in that work. And I say, I know it sounds a little weird in the career world, sign the darn thing. Make sure your name is on there somewhere, and you can get away from anybody thinking you're just being boastful or whatever by saying, you know, if you have any questions, contact me. You're doing it in a helpful way that says, hey, I'm here to help. It also gets your name in front of their face, also very helpful, but you can couch it a little bit in that. And I don't care whether you work in a huge corporation or a small mom and pop, or you're an entrepreneur, whatever. Sign your work. Regardless of what work you do, you will benefit from it personally, and your career will also benefit from it. It's human beings, as I'm sure your education is teaching you all, are not necessarily rational objects and beasts sometimes. We have oddities about us. We sometimes do things that aren't in our own best interest. We sometimes do things that seem silly or stupid in the moment. And it helps to be able to take a moment like that and say, you know what, okay, yeah, I'm proud of this. We're going to do this now. Facebook, YouTube. Podcasting is interesting. I was one of the first 20 podcasters. Back in 2004, because I had content. I was already been writing my career column for a long time, and I had some audio equipment, so I was able to start literally within 2 weeks of the term being coined. Hold on. Nowadays, podcasting's sort of been infiltrated by the big boys, but that doesn't mean you can't use it to your own advantage. When I'm talking with voiceover people or actors or someone like that, one of the hardest things to do in acting is to get known, is to have work, to show people. You know, you do showcases, or you do open mic nights, or you do this and the other. I tell them, you know what, you have a great new tool at your advantage here. YouTube and podcasting. Do your own shows. Do your own shows. Do your own web show. Do your own comedy half hour. Do whatever you do. Do your own voiceover work. Find an animator who's looking for voices for their animation and do voiceover for their animation. There is no longer reason these days not to have your own reel, as they call it. And that reel doesn't just apply to the entertainment industry, okay? It applies to everything that we do. You need that reel. You need those things, those interesting things to show people. Go out there and start doing them. Take something that really interests you and start doing it. Then you're going to generate interesting stuff that you can share out there and start to share amongst people, and hopefully start to attach and start to bring that opportunity to you. Again, you just want to have people say, hey, have you heard about, I know someone who does blah. You never know where that's going to lead. You really don't. One of the last things, too, is tied into what I'm doing right now. Share what you know. Whether you're sharing it online, you're sharing it in person, teach everyone around you who wants to learn. If you have someone asking you a question, take that question seriously and answer that question. They came to you looking for an answer. And your answer may be imperfect, or at least you may think it's a bit imperfect in some ways, but guess what? Together, you're going to arrive at a good answer. But never, ever slough off a question that's asked of you. Because if that person took the time, took the energy, took the personal fear to ask you a question, they want to know the answer. And the fact is, if they want to know that answer, I can guarantee you, times it by 10, times it by 100, times it by 1,000 in the era of the internet, other people out there want to know that same answer. Okay? There used to be a figure that they used, the editors at newspapers used to use. If one person wrote a letter, that counted as 10 people who didn't take the time to write the letter. And you could easily extrapolate that if you got 5 letters in something, okay, that's 50 people who were ticked off about whatever I wrote or whatever I was saying. Okay? You can do the same thing. If that one person has a question for you, 10, 100, 1,000 other people probably also have that same question. And again, it can be in the course you're working, it can be in the course of your life. It really doesn't matter. Because in this day and age, we are all freelancers. Okay? I don't care where your paycheck comes from today, this week. As we all know, that could happen. That could change like that, right? We've all been there. You need to think of yourself as a freelancer and say, this is my client right now, and I'm doing the best work I can do for that client, but I also need to be looking out down the road, looking out for new opportunities, building new clients, building new aspects of my freelance career, whatever. You need to be thinking that way. Because I've seen too many people over the years be trapped in jobs that were, from their description to me, definitely mentally abusing jobs, and in some cases even physically abusing jobs, and they still wouldn't leave. No matter what I said, I can't leave. I can't leave. And that, to me, was one of the saddest things I ever heard from someone. It led to me thinking in my own mind, if you say you are trapped, you are. If you feel that you are trapped, that is the first major, biggest sign that you need to get out and change. Okay? But in my own career, the struggles I've had in my own career and the struggles I've heard because I write about careers, it has really driven home to me how important it is to talk about these things, to think about these things, to utilize tools like we have today that have never existed before in our history to get out the word about what we know, what we do, and how well we do it. I mean, to me, I'll even say it this way, and it sounds a little rough, but you are foolish if you are not using these free tools that you are given. It is like not using the telephone back in the day. Okay? These are tools that are free, cheap or free for you, that you can use to make your life and your career better. And if you're not using them, you're foolish. Don't do that. Yes, it can be scary. I do want to address that. It can be frightening and be a little off-putting. What do I have to write? How do I do, oh, I'm not that great of a writer. You know what? You get better. I started writing the column when I had never written anything but college papers. And everything I had, I ran through my wife, who's an English teacher, and it would come back all redlined at the time. And every column, I got a little bit better. And those chronic problems that she corrected every single column, every single week, started to disappear. My commas got better. My possessives got better. You know, everything. Anybody can get there. And I will say, even if the quality of what you're sharing, how it's presented, how it's shot on video, how it's written is a little bit less than perfect, and we'll all think our stuff is less than perfect because that's just, again, human nature. If it's good information, people will forgive a lot. People will forgive crappy video if the message inside that video is good and important to them. So don't let that stop you. That's a whole nother thing about perfection and the trap we fall into there about we never do anything because we want it perfect. Well, you can't get perfect unless you do it. Especially true with podcasting and YouTube and any of these news sources. You just got to do it. Every Twitter message you'll get a little better. Every Facebook post you'll get a little better. But you'll stumble early on. That's just the way it works. You have to learn as you go. So please don't let that throw you off. I know it can seem, just to close, it can seem a little daunting because I walk the line between introvert and extrovert. Depending on the time of day of the week, the day of the month, I go either way. And I often get questions of people, well, what about the introverts amongst us? And what I tell them is this, I said, it doesn't cut you out. And in fact, you can still utilize these tools often if you are still a relatively introverted person because these give you that distance. You can say something in a blog post or on Facebook that you might not say face-to-face to someone because the conflict is just too close to you. But by giving yourself some distance, you can actually bring out some of those ideas. This comes from the fact my wife and I taught an online course on podcasting and writing. And one of the things she noticed immediately from her face-to-face classes to this online class was the amount of discussion that took place. People are verbose online. They will talk and talk and talk and talk. They may be the quietest person sitting in the corner in a costume, but put them online where they've got that distance, conversation flows. And so that sort of brought this home to me, is you can use these tools even if you're a little bit introverted, because you will have some distance between you and that physical person there that might intimidate you. But that's pretty much all I have today. I hope you guys can face these two challenges of both figuring out what you want to do and also then using the tools we have to tell people what you do and how well you do it so you can bring that opportunity to you. You guys have any questions? Any questions? I always ask the question, it's like, huh? You look like you have a question. I want to thank you again and thank Danielle, of course, for inviting me out. If you have anything else you'd like to talk about with me or anything you'd like to check out from me, all my talks on a variety of topics are online at douglasewelch.com. You'll find a link to my YouTube channel there, which has both the full videos and clips of my various talks, which you'll hear some of these phrases that I've been talking about tonight because that's what's going on right there, right now. But I hope that this is helpful for you, and I hope that in the future it's useful to your clients. So thanks again.